Welcome. We're going to be in Genesis chapters 42 to 43 today, and we'll be continuing the genealogy, so to speak, the generations of Jacob, and specifically we're going to be talking a lot about Joseph and his brothers today. So real quickly, we've been talking about Joseph for a good while now. Basically, ever since chapter 37, he was favored by his father, apparently a little too much. He was given this fancy coat of many colors, and his brothers were very jealous of that. He also gave some bad reports about his brothers as well. They didn't really like him for that either. Eventually, he was sent off to go see how his brothers are doing, and they see him there to go see how his brother, but they were able to be convinced to just leave him in a pit. But unfortunately, Judah had the bright idea of, how about we just sell this guy? I mean, we don't get anything if he dies down here in this pit, so let's just sell him, and then we'll get some profit out of him instead of just killing him, and then his blood won't be on our hands either. So that was Judah's suggestion. In chapter 38, we then switch to Judah, and he sleeps with his daughter-in-law, who was acting as a prostitute because he didn't give her his youngest son because he feared that he would die somehow, and some bad things happen. But we do know, most importantly, that Judah is part of the line of promise, from where the Messiah, Jesus Christ, would come from. And so it's important to keep in mind that while we're kind of focusing on Joseph in these chapters, we should never forget about Judah. So Judah suggested that they sell Joseph off into slavery. Judah slept with his daughter-in-law, who was acting as a prostitute, so both bad things there. And he wasn't giving her his youngest son either beforehand. So Judah's going to come up again in the chapters that we'll be reading. So just keep that in mind. See if he's changed at all. And then we go back into Joseph, talking about him in chapter 39. He sold off to an officer of Pharaoh named Potiphar, and he's treated all right there, and he becomes pretty much the head or second head of the household, basically. And then Potiphar's wife wants to sleep with him, and makes up the story that Joseph was trying to rape her, and so Joseph is then thrown into prison. He also becomes appointed to a high place in the prison, though. He meets two prisoners, interprets their dreams, the cupbearer and the chief baker. The baker, of course, dies, and the cupbearer is appointed after a few days back to his original position at Pharaoh's side. And so Joseph had correctly interpreted those dreams by God's power, and Pharaoh, after 2 whole years, quite a while later, the cupbearer had forgotten about Joseph, but Pharaoh had this very intense, pressing dream, and no one could interpret it for him. And the cupbearer remembers, there's this Hebrew prisoner. He was, pretty much an official there, and he was able to interpret my dreams. Perhaps he can help. And so they call Joseph over to Pharaoh, and he interprets Pharaoh's dream. And so he says that there will be 7 years of good produce in the land of Egypt, followed by 7 years of great famine. Not just in Egypt either, but basically the entire world. And so there's that danger there. And he gives them a suggestion as well on what they should be doing, not just merely interpreting the dream, but also with godly wisdom, giving them advice on how to go about this. And so Pharaoh wonders, there's no one else as smart as this guy who has the Spirit of God with him. So let's go and appoint Joseph to a very high position, and so he can just basically take care of all of these administrative tasks and supplying the people with food, storing the food, and eventually doling out the food to needy people. And so then we get into chapter 42. So the famine, as before, it stretched out to the land of Canaan now, and That's where Joseph came from. That's where his family is. And they are in need of food. And they hear, oh, there's some food, some grain for sale in Egypt. I think we'll have to send some people down there to get that food. And of course, they all think that Joseph has died, except his, the brothers. They know what happened to Joseph, that they sold him into slavery. But Joseph's father, he thinks he's dead. Probably everyone else thinks he's dead as well. And they definitely don't think that they'll be meeting Joseph in Egypt. So if you want to read, go ahead and go to the Bible Study React channel and react to that message. I just sent it. So just react to that message and then we'll go through that. Have some volunteers to read. Okay, I see Dogman on there first. And I also see Danny on there. So we'll try to do this back to back. And Dogman, could you take verses 1 to 17 of chapter 42? And then immediately after he finishes, Danny, could you take verses 18 to 38? Just continue right when he finishes verse 17.
All right, I'm going to read from the NASB 95. Now Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, and Jacob said to his sons, "Why are you staring at one another?" He said, "Behold, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us from that place, so that we may live and not die." Then 10 brothers of Joseph went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, "I am afraid that harm may befall him." So the sons of Israel came to buy grain among those who were coming, for the famine was in the land of Canaan also. Now Joseph was the ruler over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he disguised himself to them and spoke to them harshly. And he said to them, "Where have you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan, to buy food." But Joseph had recognized his brothers, although they did not recognize him. Joseph remembered the dreams which he had about them, and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to look at the undefended parts of our land." Then they said to him, "No, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies." Yet he said to them, "No, but you have come to look at the undefended parts of our land." They said, "Your servants are 12 brothers in all, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is with our father today, and the one is no longer alive." Joseph said to them, "It is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you will be tested. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you that he may get your brother, while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you. But if not, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." They put them all together in prison for 3 days.
Sorry about that. I'll be reading a New Living Translation. On the third day, Joseph said to them, "I am a God-fearing man. If you do as I say, you will live. If you really are honest men, choose one of your brothers to remain in prison. The rest of you may go home with grain for your starving families, but you must bring your youngest brother back to me. This will prove that you are telling the truth and you will not die." To this they agreed. Speaking among themselves, they said, "Clearly, we are being punished because of what we did to Joseph long ago. We saw his anguish when he pleaded for his life, but we wouldn't listen. That's why we're in this trouble. Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy?" Reuben asked, "but you wouldn't listen, and now we have to answer for his blood." Of course, they didn't know that Joseph understood them, for he had been speaking to them through an interpreter. Now he turned away from them and began to weep. When he regained his composure, he spoke to them again. Then he chose Simeon from among them and had him tied up right before their eyes. Joseph then ordered his servants to fill the man's sack with grain, but he also gave special instructions to return each brother's payment on top of his sack. He also gave them supplies for their journey home. So the brothers loaded their donkeys with the grain and headed for home. But when they stopped for the night, one of them opened the sack to get grain for his donkey. He found his money in the top of his sack. "Look," he exclaimed to his brothers, "my money has been returned. It's here in my sack." Then their hearts sank. Trembling, they said to each other, "What has God done to us?" When the brothers came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him everything that had happened to them. "The man who was governor of the land spoke very harshly to us," they told him. "He accused us of being spies scouting the land. But we said, 'We are honest men. not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of one father. One brother is no longer with us, and the youngest is at home with our father in the land of Canaan. Then the man who was governor of the land told us, this is how I will find out if you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me and take grain for your starving families and go on home. But you must bring your youngest brother back to me. Then I will know you are honest men and not spies. Then I will give you back your brother, and you may trade freely in the land. As they emptied out their sacks, there in each man's sack was a bag of money he had paid for the grain. The brothers and their father were terrified when they saw the bags of money. Jacob exclaimed, you are robbing me of my children. Joseph is gone, Simeon is gone, and now you want to take Benjamin too? Everything is going against me. Then Reuben said to his father, you may kill my 2 sons if I don't bring Benjamin back to you. I'll be responsible for him, and I will promise to bring him back. But Jacob replied, my sons will not go down with you. His brother Joseph is dead, and he is all I have left. If anything should happen to him on your journey, you would be sending this grieving, white-haired man to his grave.
All right, thank you. So there are a lot of different parallels that are going on here, and I'll try to bring some of them out at least. So first we see, of course, that Joseph is the governor of Egypt over the land, and the brothers, they need food. But we see that they didn't send Benjamin. Their father didn't send Benjamin. And it's worth noting for perhaps a couple of reasons why. Number one, he was the last of this particular mother, particular wife. And he's perhaps worried of sending, one of the brothers with the rest of the brothers. He did receive a bad report from Joseph. I don't know if he knew, well, he probably didn't know what happened, but perhaps he has some kind of idea that, maybe these other brothers, they're not good people, and they might put Benjamin in danger or even kill him somehow. Maybe he has that in the back of his mind for what happened to Joseph, because he certainly sees their character, the character of these brothers for all of those years. So either way, he doesn't send Benjamin. But that becomes what Joseph is asking for later on. And a couple parallels, though, is that Joseph puts them in a cistern prison for a few days, very similar to the pit that they threw him into while they were thinking of what to do with him before Judah suggested that they sell him. And perhaps that is what brings to their mind, it must be God doing these things for us, because we see these parallels. Must be God doing these things to us because we heard Joseph pleading and begging for his life, and perhaps that's why these bad things are happening to us. But there's going to be even more parallels than that. And another possible parallel, at least what the commentary brings up, is that they were leaving Egypt lacking one brother because Simeon was bound, and they were supposed to come back for him. So Simeon was bound. They were lacking one brother, but they went off with some extra silver. They had their money put back in the top of their sacks. So just very similar, perhaps, to the way that they sold Joseph for a few pieces of silver, and they went back home lacking a brother there. But we're going to see even more parallels as we go through this. So my first question for you guys, though, is when we look at chapter 42, we see this part in verse 9. Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them. So he saw his brothers, he recognized them, and he remembered these dreams. And then he said to them, you are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land. Is there a connection between saying you are spies and remembering the dreams that he had of them, that they would bow down to him as stars? What do you guys think? Is there a connection there? Or is it just a random detail?
100% a connection. Or they pleaded with Joseph for grain, and even said that they are his servants.
Yeah. That's the obvious connection. And my question goes a little further, though, to ask, is there a connection between remembering the dreams and accusing them of being spies? Enlil says that he was testing them. Why? Regarding the dream.
See if they had changed?
See if they had changed? Okay. What does that have to do with the dream, though, if anything?
Talking about Joseph's dream?
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's the only one who dreamed that they would come and bow down to him. We know that that was part of the dream, that the sheaves of wheat bowed down, and they would laugh at him and say, "Oh, so we going to bow down to you?" I don't. That's not what happens here, I said.
Yeah. But is there a question? But is there a connection between the dream that he had and him accusing them of being spies?
Not that I can see.
It's a tough question. Dreams and what they did to him. Brothers would definitely remember that. So perhaps that kind of general question, or that general connection.
Right. Maybe a stretch, but like he came to spy on them. Like his dad sent him Joseph to spy on them, I guess. And they, to like come back, tell Jacob about them, how they were doing with the flocks. Maybe is that what we were asking?
That is definitely a possibility. It's another connection that the commentary suggests. So just like Jacob sent Joseph, his son, and he already gave a bad report to his brothers, and perhaps his brothers thought that he was spying on them again, wanting to be a tattletale to their father again, and perhaps they looked at him as a spy, and that's why he accused them of being spies. So that's a possibility for sure. And another possibility for the connection between the specific dreams that he had and accusing them of spies, in other words, in general, testing them, like what Enlil suggested, was that, according to the commentary, because of his dreams, Joseph knew that his brothers were destined to be stars. In other words, leaders under his authority. They were to play an important role in the future of God's program, but they acted not like leaders should be acting. So in other words, it's because that they were supposed to be eventually leaders that Joseph is testing them to make sure that they will be properly going through their leadership responsibilities and be qualified to do them. So certainly a possibility there. And those connections and parallels aren't as strong as the ones we'll look at in chapter 43, but they're still, I think, good to point out. Certainly very worthwhile to point out as well. So my next question is, why did Joseph want to see Benjamin? What do you guys think? Why did he ask for Benjamin? They said, well, one brother is no more, one brother is back with our father, we didn't bring him. And Joseph says, well, if you don't bring Benjamin over here to show that you're not spies, then you won't see my face. Why Benjamin?
I think it was because they were pretty close and he missed him. They were the only children of Rachel, so they would have been closer than the other brothers who were always older and jealous and everything like that. So they, from what I remember, they were closer and they're pretty decently close in age, and also they both had the same mother, so quite perhaps a close friendship was between them, because I won't spoil anything, but we see how affectionate he is towards Benjamin later in the story. So
yeah, well, I'll ask that question later on, if you see any reason for that affection other than that he's just affectionate towards his brother. But yeah, he definitely likes his brother, likes him a lot, and perhaps he's just wondering if his brother is even still alive, because all he has right now is the testimony of his 10 brothers who sold him into slavery. That's all he has right now. He doesn't know if his brother Benjamin is still alive. So perhaps that's another reason why he's calling him over. Interesting questions, though. So my next question, though, is why put the money back in their sacks? They were returning back to their homeland. Why did he put the money back in their sacks?
I wish I had a raise hand button.
Would be handy.
I think they have that on Discord stages actually, where you can raise your hand and ask to speak. But the question at hand was why he included the money. I think the answer to that would be, I'm pretty sure that Joseph was quite smart, and he was having this plan to test them. So it was a part of the plan, or it could also be that he was testing to see if they were honest. Was it? He was testing to see if they were honest. So I'm a little confused on the story just because I need to read over it. But they returned back to the father and saw that they had the money, right? But later, when they stole not stole, but had the silver cup later with Benjamin, that they didn't get all the way back. So I think it was to test them, and also a part of the whole, seeing if they had changed thing. I think Joseph was. I mean, God gave Joseph tremendous wisdom to be able to plan the, divine wisdom to plan the 7 years of famine, 7 years of plenty, store up and save so we don't die thing. It would be no surprise to me if God gave Joseph more divine wisdom to know how to be able to see that his brothers really were different, that they wouldn't just be his friend because he was super rich and powerful, but that they would actually genuinely be sorry for what they did, and he would have that sort of trust restored to them. Because of course, imagine your long-lost brother that you sold off to slavery gets promoted and becomes a powerful, like nowadays, like CEO, and has got tons of money and influence and power. And if you find that out, you're going to want to be on his good side, and you'll gripe all you want. But if he gives you lots of money and doesn't, have anything bad happen to you, you'll be thankful. So I'm sure that there was this desire in Joseph to see if they would genuinely be sorry for what they did, apart from knowing that he was this super powerful Egyptian pharaoh guy-like thing.
Yeah, that's a good point about why Joseph perhaps didn't tell them that he was their brother straight out, and specifically for putting their money back in their sacks could be a test of their greed, basically. If they were willing to sell their brother for money, then what would they do if they got some free money back? What would they do with that?
Exactly.
But yeah, good stuff. My final question for this chapter to you guys is, was it okay for Joseph to accuse them of being spies when he knows that they weren't spies, and pretend like he was not their brother? What do you guys think? Was it okay for him to test them in that way?
Yes, because Joseph is a God-fearing man, and Joseph knows better not to do anything that would disobey God or go against God.
Okay. I think we should be careful of using general statements like that to justify every particular action that someone does. We know that David was a man after God's own heart. We know that Lot was called righteous, and so was Abraham, yet they had their own failings, moral failings here and there. A lot of people are saying yes, though, that it was okay for Joseph to accuse his brothers of being spies. Why do you guys say yes?
Well, I think the other thing to hold into account is also that if Joseph had been absolutely forthcoming, there would be no way of seeing if he could truthfully trust his brothers. I know it's a little difficult, but it's kind of like the I wouldn't say fallacy, but like the thing that happened with Jesus and the Pharisees when they said, "Where are you going?" And he says, "Where I'm going, you cannot come." And now he knows that they're going to be going and pondering what on earth is he talking about. And that's exactly what the Pharisees do. They're like, in the Gospel of John, they're like scratching their heads saying, is Jesus going to go kill himself? Like, where is he going that we can't follow him? Like, they're frustrated. They're trying to figure it out. And that's exactly why Jesus was so cryptic, because he was revealing the gospel to those who were humbly seeking him. And he was hiding it from the proud and the arrogant. But he wasn't doing it in a way as to lie. He was doing it in a way that withheld the truth from them. So by Joseph accusing his brothers, saying, "Oh, you're spies. You're just coming here." It's a little different because he's accusing them of something that, I mean, Joseph was just human, so there's like maybe he was partially concerned that his brothers would do harm to him again. I don't know. That's not likely because he was in such a powerful position, but you never know. Like Joseph genuinely was trying to see if his brothers were genuine or if they were not. And so, although the story itself of him being like, "Oh, you're spies," and everything like that wasn't necessarily accurate, the desire to find out if they were genuine or not, which is true in both stories, both the real story and the "you're spies from another country" story, that part is accurate because he wasn't sure if they were genuine or if they were fake. He wanted to see if their hearts had changed and if they were sorry for what they did and if they were still greedy, still willing to sell a brother. As later in the story shows, they were not willing to sell Benjamin or leave Benjamin behind. And Judah, or Reuben, I forget which one exactly, he has a lot of brothers, says, no, 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 take me instead of Benjamin. It'll crush father if Benjamin does not come back. So they did have a change of heart. So Joseph was seeking for the truth, but he couldn't. But the only way for him to seek for the truth and to find it was if he did not reveal to them who he really was, and if he gave them an understanding of his desire to find out, are you guys legit or not? Even though the narrative itself was not in its details accurate, to him being like your spies or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's an interesting question, though. And, what Dogman said is also very interesting as well, where, yes, he didn't have to reveal that he was their brother, but he was unsure about the other one, accusing them of being spies. So, yeah, I agree that Joseph's motives are good, but we do have to ask whether the way that he went about accomplishing those motives was fine. Because, I can think of other ways that he could test his brothers and not accuse them of being spies, or putting his fancy cup in Benjamin's sack later on. We haven't read that part yet. And then saying, don't you know that a man like me can practice divination? But yeah, it's something that we'll keep in mind at least, especially when we get to that divination portion. Something we'll keep in mind, and something to continue to think about as well. But let's get into the next chapter, unless you guys have any further questions on chapter 42. Any other questions? Or comments?
I did want to just a small backpedal to the question about why with the gold or the money, I guess.
Sure.
I wanted to say that he did it out of love because he still loved his brothers. I didn't know if anyone messaged that yet, but yeah, because he still loved his brothers.
Yeah, that could definitely be part of it. He still wants to, support his family back home, make sure that they have enough resources. Definitely struck a lot of fear into them, though. So I think it was also part of the test as well. I'll take care, Tia. All right, let's get to the next chapter then. And I see two more reactions. We have Hat and Dan. So we'll read this pretty much the same way like we read the other chapter, just one after the other. Hat, could you read chapter 43, verses 1 to 14? And immediately after she finishes verse 14, Dan, could you read 15 to 34? Oh, he's not. Okay, we'll swap to Dogman then. So Dogman, could you read 15 to 34?
Sure.
All right, whenever you're ready, Hat.
Okay. In the ESV, now the famine was severe in the land, and when they had eaten the grain that they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go again, buy us a little food." But Judah said to him, "The man solemnly warned us, saying, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food.' But if you will not send him, we will not go down. The man said to us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. Israel said, why did you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother? They replied, the man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred, saying, is your father still alive? Do you have another brother? What we told him was an answer to these questions. Could we in any way know that he would say, bring your brother down? And Judah said to Israel, his father, send the boy with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. I will be a pledge of his safety. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. If we had not delayed, we would now have returned twice. Then their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags, carry a present down to the man, a little balm and a little honey, gum, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Take double the money with you. Carry back with you the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take also your brother, and arise, go again to the man. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, and may he send back your other brother, and Benjamin. And as for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved.
So the men took this present, and they took double the money with them and Benjamin. They arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, bring the men into the house.
Just lost connection.
And we have brought other money down with us to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks. He replied, peace to you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has put treasure in your sacks for you. Now receive your money. Then he brought Simeon out to them. And when the man had brought the men into Joseph's house and given them water, and they washed their feet, and when he had given their donkeys fodder, they prepared the present for Joseph's coming at noon, for they had heard that he should eat bread there. They should eat bread there. When Joseph came home, they brought into the house to him the present that they had with them, and bowed down to him to the ground. And he inquired about their welfare, and said, is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive? They said, your servant our father is well, he is still alive. And they bowed their heads and prostrated themselves. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son. Then Joseph hurried out, for his compassion grew warm for his brother, and he sought a place to weep. And he entered his chamber and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out, and controlling himself he said, serve the food. They served him by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked at one another in amazement. Portions were given to them from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs. And they drank and were merry with him.
All right, thanks. So that was the last chapter we'll take a look at today, chapter 43. So they've been waiting for some time in the land of Canaan till the food they bought from Egypt had pretty much run out, and so they had to go back again. And during this entire time, of course, we have Simeon still in prison. They didn't come right on back to him because his father wouldn't allow that. And, you can see that Jacob's kind of being fairly self-pitying in these chapters. Oh no, Simeon is no more. Joseph is no more. You'll bring my gray hairs down to Sheol. And he does worry about them. It feels like it's kind of bordering on pity a little bit. And he just left Simeon there. And he does decide, though, finally to send Benjamin after Judah makes that pledge. And we'll also see later on, perhaps next week, Lord willing, that when Judah, he's over there and he basically, after the cup was found in Benjamin's sack, and then Benjamin was going to be, in prison, basically the servant of Joseph. He wants to, switch places there and so on. So my first question is, from what we see of Judah, in just these couple chapters and what we've discussed so far, has Judah changed, and how?
What was the question again?
No, the question was, has Judah changed, and how? Or if how?
Everything I know about Judah, he kind of goes from, like, what do you call it? Like selling his brother to not being willing to let Benjamin be a slave. So, Joseph was sold to slavery. Benjamin was not sold into slavery or given into slavery. Judah was, they were greedy. They sold their brother Joseph for money, but in this, they give back the money that was taken from them. So there's a sense to which we see Judah was truly repentant. They talk about, in like, oh, God is judging us for this former sin that we've done, and so I think that they really had time to contemplate the sin that they've done and truly repented in their heart. And so given a second opportunity, we see, throughout the story that, Judah decides not to make the same mistake again. So offers himself to be a servant of Joseph instead of Benjamin. So I think that his heart had truly changed, and he sees that what he did, or what he helped his brothers do, because they all did it together. Reuben, I think, was the one that had the best intentions to get Joseph out, bring him home, maybe for some opportunity to look good to his dad and be on his dad's favorite list, maybe because he saved his favorite son. I don't know. That was what I read in one commentary. But Judah seemed to have truly really changed, and truly, he didn't want to see his father so sad again, because when they told his father that Joseph was dead, his father was sad to the point of death. So he didn't want to see that again. I think, from all that we see, he had changed in those ways from all that I can understand.
Yeah, certainly looks that way. And Hat says Benjamin is their father's next favorite, and we definitely see that played out. But they don't seem hateful toward him like they were toward Joseph. And Enlil says that Judah, and the other brothers too, but namely Judah, this time really cares about what their father feels and thinks and things like that. And Jacqueline says that Judah is the one who decided to sell Joseph. In this circumstance, he's much older, likely realizes how doing this would hurt his father. So I think the way he treats Benjamin is definitely a proof of change. Yeah, I'd agree with what you said too, Biget. So, perhaps related to this, why did Joseph give Benjamin when they were seated? So let's go to that section. So he invites them into his house. They were seated there, and they were seated according to their ages as well. So that is verse 33. They sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth, kind of in order with their ages there. They looked at one another in amazement, most likely because they hadn't disclosed, their ages. But Joseph knew them, of course, because he was their brother. But my question is, in verse 34, why was Benjamin's portion 5 times as many as any of theirs?
I think that, again, I'm a bit of the Joseph conspiracy theorist here, but I think that Joseph was really trying to show favoritism to Benjamin so that he could see if his brothers would want to get rid of him too. So if he's favoring Benjamin, putting him at the best place to sit, giving him, the most food, obviously showing favoritism to him, treating them all nice, but especially Benjamin. Well, I think that could invoke some feelings of jealousy, because Benjamin was also, the father cared about him a lot. So there's going to be that sort of opportunity for them to say, oh, he demanded that he be kept as a slave, and or whatever. He was making it very easy for them to just repeat their past sin, but very hard for them. Only if they were truly changed would they be able to say, no. Even though we wish that, our father wouldn't play favorites, we're not going to hurt him. We're not going to have Benjamin be gone, from it. So.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, along with what the others said in the channel as well. So we see this, I'd say, a very major parallel between Joseph's situation beforehand that led his brothers to jealousy and what he's trying to recreate here. By giving Benjamin all of this special attention, by giving Benjamin extra stuff, and in the next chapters we'll see even more extra stuff, more changes of clothes, more silver, more money, and things like that. And then he puts the focus on Benjamin still when he puts the silver cup into Benjamin's sack. And that's when the real test begins pretty much, because as far as the other brothers know, they know that Benjamin is guilty of stealing this cup. And they also saw Benjamin receiving all of this favoritism, so it would be so easy for them to just go, we're really jealous of this guy, we don't want to see him get any more stuff. And not only that, but apparently my internet has disconnected. Let me wait.
We're alive.
Oh, I guess I'm back. Disconnected
Yes.
again. What point did I stop? You remember?
It would have been so easy for them to
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Benjamin.
So because Benjamin received all this favoritism, because at least as far as they know, he was even guilty of stealing something, it would be so easy for them to just leave Benjamin to the coming punishment that he was supposed to receive. But we see even more so, especially Judah specifically. He steps up and says, well, this would make our father really bad, and even though Benjamin would deserve such a punishment for stealing this thing, and even though he's been treated better, and I might be a little jealous of that, take me instead of Benjamin. We'll see that in the next chapter, though. But that's where the real test begins. But it starts here when Joseph is showing favoritism to Benjamin and giving him all of these extra portions, more so than anyone else. And yeah, like Hat said, they're a lot more selfless now. So even though they see Benjamin receiving, all of this extra stuff, verse 34 says, and they drank and were merry with him. So they're enjoying themselves in this particular banquet, even though one of their brothers is favored a lot more than they are. They're still enjoying things going on. They're not racked with jealousy and terrible thoughts of things to do to Benjamin. So yeah, very good points there that you guys made. So it is that character development that I wanted to highlight with Judah, especially because Judah's part of the promised line. And even though we're kind of featuring Joseph in the narrative, he's just there to make way for the promised line and to preserve that line. He's not really the main character of the story. The real main character is God, of course, and we see his sovereignty at work throughout all of these things. But Judah is part of the promised line, even though we're looking at Joseph a lot. So I have a question for the next person in the reaction list, and that is Danny. So Danny, my question basically is, in all of these chapters that we just read, chapters 42 and 43, and specifically looking at Judah, what kind of application can we make from that after seeing Judah's life? It's a broad question, but you can think about it.
Put others before ourselves.
Yeah, it's a good application. We see Judah, he put himself and his own monetary wealth, which wasn't much, he put that before Joseph, his very own brother. But now we do see that selfless aspect from Judah, which is really important to see. And we see that character development as well. Any other applications that you guys would like to make or can make from chapters 42 and 43? Yeah, not so much an application, but definitely a good truth there, Jacqueline. It's fine. It's good that you brought that up. It could definitely be foreshadowing Christ's own substitution. Yeah, we should definitely be thanking and praising the Lord, and specifically related to this chapter, the end of chapter 43, we should be thanking and praising the Lord even if we see other people being favored materially. They didn't let that jealousy or selfishness get in the way of them, just enjoying themselves and not trying to kill or enslave their favored brother. And there will be times like that in life, especially with material blessings. You'll see other people, they'll have more than you, and they might seem to be enjoying themselves more. They won't have as many problems as you, perhaps, and yet we should still be thanking the Lord for what we have. And it's, of course, His decision to decide who gets what. It's a good point, Beget. Usually people with less than we have as well. And if we're sitting here on Discord, there are definitely people with less than we have. All right, then, any final thoughts or questions on these two chapters that you guys want to bring up?
I think the story of Joseph is quite sweet in its entirety. It's a very gospel-centered foreshadowing, but a beautiful story in and of itself, of how even though a brother was betrayed and it hurt him, he still didn't give up hope, and he didn't give up his hope in God specifically. And he eventually was able to, fulfill his God-given purpose. Now, obviously, all of our purposes aren't the same, like Joseph, his brothers had a purpose, but their purpose wasn't to rule in Egypt. All of our purpose isn't to be big and important or something like that. But
Time
the point
for us
is,
to go to Egypt.
The point being, the redemption arc, the forgiveness, the fact that his brothers changed, the way that God took care of him, and the scripture goes out of its way to specifically say, but even while he was in jail, the Lord's love was still with him. God was still with him, and then to see how his brothers really did change, and then his father, before his father dies, is able to come to Egypt and see Joseph and bless his children, Joseph eventually ends up saying, this was God's work ultimately. So it doesn't remove their human responsibility in him wanting to see if they changed. But he could see at the end of it all that God really had been orchestrating it all for his glory, even the hard stuff, even the stuff that looked like it was the end. It was all working together for God's plan. And that is a plan that spans generations. If you look at the whole thing, after God's people are enslaved in Egypt, God leads them out, and then the people of Israel are formed, and the nation of Israel. So it's like all of this is in this overarching story, this overarching plan of redemption, which is for Jesus to come and our souls to be saved by Him in His blood. So I think that as in and of itself, as a small story, it's beautiful, but also as a part of a bigger story that spans beyond his lifetime, it's a beautiful testimony to God's providential working through time, through history, through His people. So, yeah, I love it. It's always touching to see and hear and read, and to see Joseph's heartfelt, like when he just starts bursting out weeping and he has to go by himself. You can see the love in his heart for his brothers. Like he's not doing a good job with his interrogation, because that's what it is. He's interrogating them to see if they've changed. But hearing them talk, it just pierces his heart, and he's just weeping. And it's apparent how much he loves his brothers. So, yeah, I think that's really beautiful in and of itself.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. And we should definitely not forget the whole meta-narrative of Scripture that you mentioned. We see God working, we see God's sovereignty here, and we see His plan for redemption at work. And, we can kind of get bogged down in some of these small details sometimes, but it's important to never forget that all of this was simply to preserve the promised seed and make sure that from the line of Judah, the Messiah would be able to come into the world. Really good stuff. All right, Hat, we're on to you now. Could you close us out with a word of prayer?
Alrighty. Heavenly Father, thank you that we were able to come together and learn more about your word, Lord. And your word is beautiful. You're beautiful. And yeah, I just pray that we will apply what we learned, and yes, that we'll see your sovereignty in this story and all throughout the Bible, Lord. And your Bible is an amazing book, amazing communication with us. And I just pray for everybody here that they will have a blessed rest of their evening or day and their week, and that we'll all be able to, as your will, gather again together next Tuesday. And I ask all these things in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for being here. Hope to see you guys next week. And take care.